Good morning and welcome to our Bible class hour here at Withamsville. We're thankful that you're with us this morning. We will be continuing our series on parenting that Philip Taylor and I are doing together that we've entitled The Parent Trap. This is a transition week as we move kind of into a different area of the material as we go. So I wanted to start with just a brief pause and review of where we've been. The first 2 weeks, we talked about faith, we talked about values, we talked about the spiritual side of what our families ought to be about and raising the adults that God has given us as children in our homes. So we just always want to come back to everything that this series is about, is truly how are we stirring their hearts towards faith? How are we stirring their hearts towards God? And that is the ultimate foundation of this class. We spent 2 weeks on that, and then we spent 2 weeks on ScreamFree Parenting. The idea of we as parents, what we bring to the table matters. And this definition of ScreamFree Parenting is learning to pause so you can respond more and react less. That's focusing on yourself and taking care of yourself. And one of the strongest points in that came to me is it's sad when we as parents need our children to be the one calming down the situation versus we in our parental role are the ones calming down the situation and therefore giving better emotional control and setting for our children in that. And so we really want to continue off of those two foundations, what we're doing spiritually for our children and what we're bringing to the table as parents in the interactions that are going to be required to deal with everything that we're going to go through from here, from behaviors to specific issues, that we are what God's called us to be in our hearts and our minds, staying in control to give our children the very best from us, first and foremost. But today's a day of transition as we move forward. And for many of you out there, we've been promising that we would get to the idea of behaviors, misbehaviors, discipline, consequences. And today is really the beginning of that as we start the second half of this class. So the big question is why do kids misbehave as we begin this? And to just kind of give you a little fun thought about the ways kids might misbehave, why don't we start with this video?
I love to communicate to music. I just started to communicate with music to my kids. They don't listen to me talking anymore. I just use their songs and get my point across. You know, seriously, you should try it. It's awesome. They do listen. We're at the mall the other day. They're just begging me for an iPhone for an hour. I finally said, dude, I'm not gonna buy you an iPhone, 'cause you ask for it like you need one. You don't. I'm not gonna buy you an iPhone. You're insane if you think I'll pay for it, so be on your way. I'm not gonna listen. Go away. You're wasting all your time. Here's a dime if you find a payphone, but no iPhone today. And that's what I do. I got an older kid now, man. I had to use a Chris Daughtry song the other day. You stayed out too late last night. I heard you sneaking in, hanging out at who knows where. Don't even try to blame this on your friends. Trust me, dude, it won't happen again. You're staying home. It's the place where you belong. You done wrong and now you're grounded for a week. I still love you, but you keep breaking your curfew. You'll regret how late you chose to be. Your abuse Excuses and excuses are getting old. So you're staying home. You're staying home. What about John Mayer, man? He's gonna have kids someday in the car. I think he might write this song. You better quit all that complaining. Don't want to hear another sound. If I hear any more whining, I'm gonna turn the car around. You got a little television, and you had enough to eat. If you don't change your disposition, I'm gonna leave you on the street. So I'm waiting for your attitude to change. I keep on waiting for your attitude to change. You say that I ain't fair, I guess that would matter if I care. So I keep on waiting for your attitude to change.
So why do kids misbehave? There's many reasons. There's so much going on in their brains. We've talked off and on, almost week to week, about how if we really think we have the ability to control them, we are misguided. They are truly individuals from birth. They have their own ways of thinking. They have their own personalities, and they're struggling for that independence as a human being, away from us and establishing what they would be wanting to be in and of themselves, even from very young ages. But we know that there are what I would call single events that, they're really tired, they're really out of sorts, they're not cooperating because they're too exhausted, and really the cure is we got to make it through and get this kid some sleep. Or maybe it's about food, or in those teenage years, as those hormones come in, sometimes we just have a bad day. And a lot of times there can be a specific situation that the children, the teenagers are worried about, and getting them past that specific situation, be that a test, be that a problem with a friend, be that a negative situation that went down that maybe we're not aware of. And if we get them through that process, the misbehavior goes away. And so single events are not nearly as complicated. The why is obvious, and we help them through the process of that. The bigger question is, what about ongoing misbehavior? And I guess our very first question that I want to bring to you today with ongoing misbehavior, the more complex things to deal with as parents, is, do they feel deeply loved? Where is the status of their heart? Where is the status of that emotional tank we'll be talking about in just a moment? We all know and value what it means to be unconditionally loved. That's not based on our abilities, our talents, our successes, that we know innately we're loved. That is what God promises to us as His children, that He loves us unconditionally, that Jesus died for us on the cross even when we were still yet sinners. In our worst state, He loved us. And our children need to know the same thing. And one way to look at it is that all of us, but especially our children, have this empty space inside us that we'll call, the authors of the book call, an emotional tank. And we need to be concerned about that emotional tank when we're dealing with ongoing issues of misbehavior. They have this incredible need to feel loved, and it's amazing how kids can reach out in so many inappropriate ways for love and attention, and we're in this ongoing struggle to help them get back to right ways of reaching out for love and attention and not going down the negative paths of behavior to do that. So they're crying out for the need to feel love through their behavior. And if the way they get your attention is to be annoying, then we're training them to be annoying. If the way they get your attention is to break the rules, then we're training them to break the rules if we're not careful with that. So we have to be aware of what are they really going after. And if it's because their emotional tank is empty, the cure is not necessarily the behavior or what's coming out of their mouth. The cure is we need to do something to fill that tank up. So we all love our children, right? I can't imagine anybody is watching this class this morning and saying, I don't love my children. So what's the problem? How are we not keeping this tank full? Well, honestly, if we look at the bigger picture, we may not know how to really meet our children's emotional needs in the way that they need us to meet their emotional needs. We come to them from our worldview and not necessarily their worldview on what love is and how we really deeply feel loved. And at the end of the day, they have to not only know that they're loved, they need to feel that they're loved. And I did coincidentally say end of the day. I hope that at the end of every day, they really feel that they are loved by us. That's a high goal, and I can't say with my children that every day they felt loved. But I pray that I'm doing well on that front at 80-90% of the time, that they leave that the end of that day they feel loved. Children that are certain of their parents' love end up replicating this list as children, as teenagers, as adults. And if I were to look at anything, this is what I hope in big picture, beyond being faithful to Jesus all their lives and their faith in Him, this is what I would hope for my children, almost a short list, that they're secure, deeply secure. The coping skills are there for whatever life throws at them. They are better able to make friends. Their confidence to being vulnerable is high, and therefore they can share their thoughts and feelings with others and take those risks. They're able to stand out in the crowd, and then that even leads to the last one, which is the ability to influence others and not just be influenced. If I would put out a goal list, would this not, I think, for all of us ring out as, yeah, this is what we want our children to be as soon as possible as they deal with the ups and downs of life. And the research is clear that as they feel deeply loved, when we keep that emotional tank full, these are the natural things that come out of it. So how do we get this tank full? How do we get the kids to this? And the primary book that we've been using is called the Parent Handbook, but in this section they really go and quote Gary Chapman and the 5 love languages, and that's really what today's session is going to be about, is implementing these 5 love languages. And so the 5 love languages are words, time, touch, presence, and actions. We'll go over this several times today. We'll be spending some individual time on each one of these 5 love languages. But if we're going to fill their emotional tank, we need to be concerned about these 5 areas and these love languages. And as we get into more of this, you'll see that each of us have our own love language that we primarily speak, and that is the way we feel loved the most. So, as parents, we need to recognize the signs of an emotional tank. It's empty. And then as we identify their love language, that's going to be the fastest way to refill that tank. But it's not just about their primary love language. It's about all 5 love languages. And in fact, we're complex human beings. And though we all have a primary love language, we need those other things. So let's just say words of affirmation are our primary love language. That doesn't mean we don't ever need a hug. It doesn't mean we don't ever need to be cuddled by our mom or our dad, because we need touch as well. And that doesn't mean if it's about touch that we don't need that quality one-on-one time that is important. We're complex, and sometimes it's the lack of one of those. Maybe the analogy there is it takes a well-balanced diet to meet everything that we need, and we need more protein per se than we might need of other things, but that doesn't mean we don't need those other nutrition as well. And that's how the love languages work. So that says take time to read each child. That's not reading to the child, that's reading them. The author suggests by the age of 7, you should have the pretty good sense of what is their primary love language. Our youngest child, Julia, she's always been a cuddler from infancy on. And I felt like we really had a clue that her love language was going to be physical touch. And she still is that person that kind of needs to sit beside us or get that hug. And if I give a hug to another child, she's right there on the backside saying, I need that hug too. She's very clear in that her love language is that. Some children aren't that easy to read. Some of them are a little more balanced between all of the 5 different love languages. But we need to learn to read each one of them. In fact, your homework going away from this week is going to be sit down with your spouse or significant people in your life that help you raise your children and really have a conversation with them about what is your child's primary love language. When it comes to this, we can't use these love languages, though, as just manipulation. We can't use this as some sort of psychological trick to get past a moment or to solve a problem in some sort of tricky kind of way. We've got to be genuine. We've got to really use the love language in a way that they know is real. Children see right through us as parents when we're trying to unnecessarily manipulate them to some sort of end. And as we do that more and more, they learn merely to be manipulative, not really being genuine in and of themselves. And of course, one of those things we want for our kids is to feel deeply loved and feel genuine in that. So it can't be about maybe some way we've let them down, maybe an absent father who comes back and just wants to give lots of gifts to their kids because of the time they've missed with them. They may appreciate the gifts, but in the long run, there's going to be a reckoning for the time that was missed. And we know through the grace of God that can happen over time. And so even if you're in an extreme situation like that, use the love languages correctly in a genuine way, and that emotional tank, even from an absentee father coming back into the child's life, will be mended correctly. That is the power of this. As we use the 5 love languages, we're actually providing them an example. Kids mimic us. And learning a love language that is not innately our own is like learning a foreign language to us. If you grew up in a household that never gave hugs, that really, mom and dad just weren't very touchy, they weren't warm and cuddly, and that was just what you grew up in, you may not really have an idea of how to be great at giving physical affection. And that may feel like the hardest thing for you to do. In other families, the words "I love you" were never said. And it's hard for those people to come around and use those words of affection for their children. It's like learning a foreign language. And we can do this. So the idea of providing an example of using all 5 love languages, regardless of our learning curve, is we're making them lovingly multilingual. What they're going to bring to their friends, to their relationship, to their marriage, to their children, is a better ability to use all 5 love languages because we help them learn to be fluent in all 5 love languages. So, and then like anything, we have to put them into practice. Practice makes perfect. But using all 5 languages will help give answers to difficult behaviors. Oftentimes, if we're just saying, well, they are words of affirmation kind of kid, I've given them those words and we're still struggling. Maybe the issue that you're dealing with needs your time. Maybe it needs a hug. Maybe it needs a different avenue to come at. And when we meet them in that love language in a different way, a different aspect, we finally break through what's going on. That void in that emotional tank is finally filled, and they don't have to act out in that way anymore. So, the first love language, we're going to go through this hopefully pretty quickly here as we have 5 areas to cover in the remaining time, is words. I'm going to spend the most amount of the time on words. Words are very powerful. There's the old thing of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We know that's a lie. We know that words stick forever. And as I've trained people in the world of abuse with my role at a children's home, Those words of, you'll never amount to anything. I wish you were never born. Those are deep, painful scars that take a lifetime to overcome. We know the power of words. And yet, in a positive sense, the power of words are just as strong, if not stronger, than anything that we can ever do from a negative sense. So at the beginning of every chapter, there's, in the book, the parenting handbook, there's some quotes from people. And so these are 3 of the quotes, but Jack says, my parents always told me I was special, and I believed them. Marissa says, mostly I remember my dad's critical words and just feeling tense around him. Alice is quoted as saying, most important of all in knowing my parents' love for me was that they always gave me lots of encouragement. And maybe some of those things strike you as you think about your childhood. But as we go through this, the first area of words that I want to talk about this morning is words of affection. Expressing our love in the power of 3 little words, I love you. And I would really encourage you to think about how much have you told your children you love them lately. Now, we've all been on quarantine or shelter in care, and we've been with each other a lot, and maybe that's given us more opportunities for having these kind of conversations. Maybe we've also had more time to get on each other's nerves, and we've said these 3 words less. One of the things that I appreciated about what Gary Chapman wrote was it's not just about those 3 words. It's different variations of that. And when you tell your child, I love being with you, I love playing with you, or I really enjoy talking with you, the power that are in those words that are not just I love you, but you're starting to give reasons why you love them. And that is just as important as saying it. And really, that even getting into specific incidences, like I like watching you draw. I love seeing you play hockey. I love watching the way you play with your little brother, has a powerful effect on their behaviors, that you are starting to share love in the way they're doing things well. And I can say in the Bovary household, that last one, when we could help them learn to play together and show them love for playing well together, that had a profound effect. That didn't mean we stopped all the fights forever or the issues of siblings getting along together, but it had a powerful effect of highlighting the positive. And this last thing on the slide of you're wonderful, you're so funny, you're great fun. These kids need, all of our kids need us to pour into them of how we love them. Putting a you in front of it is the one exception. You know, when you're sharing your feelings, you're supposed to use I statement. But when you're giving love to someone, you need to talk about them and the power of encouraging them to understand how greatly lovable they are is a powerful transcending effect. That they come away knowing innately that, yeah, they're unconditionally loved because they're unconditionally loved. But a step beyond that is, but they're quite lovable also. And we all are quite lovable. God has told us we're quite lovable. Beyond sending his son as our Savior while we were yet sinners, God talks about how much he vests in us and the talents and abilities he gives us as we are to love one another. He has shown us the way that we are lovable, and those things need to be brought out in our children. So, saying what is best for your child. Words of affection. Saying these words not for your sake, but meeting their needs so that love truly is unconditional. You know, we as parents often get into the game of manipulation. We want them to go to bed. We want them to eat their vegetables. We want them to do just what we want. Would you just please do what I wanted you to do? And we want them to be compliant, and we want the moment to pass. And we start trying to find the best psychological words we can come up with so we just get compliance. And yet, that's when we often find ourselves in a struggle that doesn't end. Because there's just something innately, I think kids know, that you're not really there to hear them out. So you need to meet them where they're at. And I think oftentimes in moments of misbehavior, one of those early songs talked about breaking curfew and coming in late. and therefore they're going to stay home for a while. It's especially with not knowing where they were and it's late at night and the worry and the stress of that, we can awfully get to the consequences, the frustration, the anger, the hurt. And it may be in those moments we need to slow down and really understand from them what's going on in their mind. Getting from them. We still unconditionally love them even though they've scared us to death and it's a major safety risk that they weren't home on time. We need to stay in an unconditional love mode to a great extent. There's going to be time for consequences. There's going to be time for behavioral management issues. We need to stop and hear and listen and love first. So, learning to express our expression. There's a little book that maybe you've used in your family. Guess how much I love you. And this is often read maybe before they're even verbal. When they were very young. But it's the story of a mama rabbit and a child rabbit. Guess how much I love you. And it's actually begun with the child rabbit trying to go down that road. And the first thing that the little rabbit does is, I love you as far as I can spread my arms apart. And then they go on to as high as the tree is. And they even go on and they can look out and see a river. And they love you as far as I can see. And they come to the end of the book and it's, I love you to the moon and back. And they agree that they love each other to the moon and back because we really can't see much further than that, especially if the moon's out at night. And that helps the child, the bunny rabbit, go to sleep. That's an exercise, and I hope that you've played that exercise with your kids, that you guys can't outlove each other. And what that does inside a child's heart to know that you can't even measure the love that you have for one another. That's a good game to play. And you know what? It's not just for little children. It needs to be done with teenagers. And as my children are becoming adults and have come back from college, I believe they still need me to play this game with them a little bit. Those words of affection just keep going all the days of their lives. But this can be hard for us. And the analogy they gave was the idea of breaking the sound barrier. You know, it took us a long time in flight before we could break the sound barrier. The plane could go that fast and break that sound barrier. But if words of affection are not your love language, then this might be kind of complicated for you. Or even if we just have to admit we're too angry to tell them that we love them. I guess maybe I'm stepping on some toes here of my own. Maybe some of yours. It's pretty sad when we're too angry to tell our child that we love them and that we feel like we absolutely in this moment can't tell them that. I think I've seen the wisdom as we've mishandled situations in our family, as we've had to come back around to what it means, and maybe there's been some significant behaviors of concern. Things that could really lead down to a significant paths if we don't handle this situation right. And really wanting to be stern and focused on how much this cannot continue to happen. And yet, so being hesitant of bringing words of affirmation out. And yet, early on in those conversations, whether I wanted to or not, I needed to assure them of love before we could proceed. And I think before, especially in times of a major behavior that could lead to problematic issues, we have to be about giving them words of affirmation. Words of comfort is another area of this idea of words. What words comfort you? I want to almost pause there for a moment and make you, what words comfort you? It could be ice cream. It could be the thought of a warm blanket. It could be an apology. It could be those simple words, I love you. What words comfort you? But I really want to ask more importantly, as we as parents, is we need to know the words that comfort our children. What words do we need to say when they're scared, when they're worried, frightened, confused? And these days even, but all the time, when they aren't understanding what's happening around them. I've heard of many stories of children not being able to understand why they can't hug their grandparents. And we've had to explain more words of comfort that they're not going to kill their grandparents if they hug them. But we need to be reasonable and safe and we need to comfort them through that because they aren't getting the comfort from their grandparents that they normally get in that time. And the grandparents aren't getting it either. So maybe we just need to really give words of comfort to them as well, and continue to pray that we'll get back to a normal level of affection soon, and the coronavirus won't stop that. But we need to use words of comfort well and wisely, as that calms fears. Fear is a huge motivation for misbehavior. Another area is words of praise, praising a child's character. We live in this celebrity culture where it's about looks, fame, income. For those of you like me that tuned into the NFL draft this weekend, it's about how great of an athlete are you, and are you worthy of being picked in the first round or the third round or the seventh round, or are you even worthy to go onto professional sports? Words of praise are the perfect offset to climbing that crazy ladder of what our world puts forth too often as what's important. And this, in turn, encourages the values that we really care about. Them being kind, them being loving, them being responsible to their responsibilities, them going out of the way for another person, loving others more than they love themselves. So when we praise children for those kind of things, there's power in that. We'll talk about showing pride in a minute in our kids, and that's a blessing. But we do need to praise achievements. Now, this is easy for what I call multi-talented children. The children that seem to be good at everything. They can play the piano, and they can do more with a soccer ball than we can believe. And they are great at drama and taking on roles and acting. But praising achievements for maybe those that we might call the untalented children, the children that don't seem to be good necessarily at anything. Praising their cooperation, their attitude, their effort, their heart. When they're barely struggling to read and they take the time to try to read a page, even if it's in a page in a simple book like this, and we praise them for that hard work. We are showing them that they are worthy, they are loved, and we're filling that up. And I would say out of these two categories, it's more important that we pray, or it's hard for me to say that, I guess, but it's as important. Children that are less talented need to know they're worthy of praise because the world's not going to give it to them innately. For the great athlete, everybody's going to tell them they're great. For the child that never has that great moment of scoring the winning goal, when do they get it? And so it's not more important, but they're less likely to get it. And so we need to make sure that we take on filling the tank, the emotional tank of those children, and being very purposeful in that. Words of affirmation, the idea of showing pride. One of the things that I've tried to do as a parent, and I've seen it in the eyes of children, when you can find a profound way to tell them how proud you are of them, those words, those moments truly transcend a child's heart almost more than any other moment. At Midwestern Children's Home, a lot of the kids we work with, unfortunately, have made bad grades most of their life. And when they finally get their life in order and they've made the best grades ever, that report card gives them a sense of being proud of themselves. But now all of a sudden, everybody has an opportunity to show them that idea of they're proud of them. And there's something that happens innately in those kids, maybe for the first time ever, that they are worthy of being proud of. And there's a security that comes out of that. Children need to be confident in their parents' love. And the more we give them that, the more we give them a secure base that they're going to walk into life with. Words of affirmation, this will be the last point we make on words, and we'll get into the others as we try to wrap up here quickly in the next 10 minutes. But I want to caution you as you talk about your children in their hearing. If we are on the phone with somebody and all we're doing is complaining about how they've misbehaved, and that's what they know you're presenting to the rest of the world, we probably have likely just created more of an atmosphere of misbehavior in our life. They're not getting the words of affirmation. They're getting the opposite of that. So when they hear us talk to a grandparent, a friend, of a moment that we're proud of them, and that, hey, they were kind, or they did this great thing, and we're sharing that with somebody else, that is giving them words of affirmation in a way of, hey, my mom is proud of me, my dad is proud of me because of what they just shared. In our society, though, we need to give a warning on this, that parents that are showing off through their kids are tiresome. And I'm not saying that about me and my feelings towards the world of Facebook or Instagram. They're tiresome for their children. That if there's this flooding of idea of my parents love through what I do, there's going to come a day the child is not successful, the child doesn't do what they're needing to do, and they're going to be insecure overwhelmingly in that moment. Now my mom can't brag about me on social media, so what's going to happen now? And it's tiresome for children also to have to keep meeting that standard. So moving on, one-on-one time, we're going to speed up now. One-on-one time, how do you feel when your child comes in and says, will you play with me? And I would ask you to ask in your heart, is your number one answer, well, we'll do that later? Maybe it's an inconvenient time. Maybe there really is your cooking, and if you walk away from the stove, things are going to get burnt, and maybe it needs to happen later. But I would challenge you that if your kid comes to you and says, will you play with me, that you find a time to say yes in that moment and you make it happen. If you have to say later, follow through. We do know that no amount of material abundance can replace a parent's time. We can give you, I've read the story of one of President Reagan's adopted sons, and how he just never felt like he got time and attention from them, and the Hollywood lifestyle they were leading, and it brought on scars that he dealt with as an adult. There are many examples of this in our society, that material abundance does not replace time. So this concept is hard for one child. If they need one-on-one time and you have one child, that can be hard, especially as they grow older. You know, if you have one child and they're an infant, we're going to give that infant the time because that's what it requires to raise and to make it through the infant stage of life. But what happens when you have 2 and 3 and 4 and more children? How do you give that one-on-one time? Well, this is a list of ways to do that, and I really want to encourage you that even if one-on-one time is not your child's primary love language, is that you look at this list and you think seriously about, how can I do that for them? One of the stories in this book is a parent who staggered bedtimes on purpose so that they could go sit on each child's bed every day at night as they put them to bed and have that 5, 10, 15-minute conversation of just one-on-one time with that child. Now, the other difficulty of one-on-one time in a multiple child household is that as soon as you start giving attention to one child, the other ones can come running because they want it also. And maybe that's just a sign that we haven't quite done a good enough job giving even attention to all of our kids and giving that one-on-one time. One-on-one time is not just about physically being with each other, although that matters, but it's creating conversation. It's finding a way to do that. It's not being afraid of disagreements. We are complex people, and we're going to have to agree to disagree. And even with our kids, we're going to have to learn to have disagreements and still have conversations. If we want truly the healthiest relationship with our adult children, it's going to have to be even over things that we disagree on. And oftentimes that can lead to the most profound conversations. I can't overstate the idea of eye contact, and even if one of the best ways to have great conversations with your kid is behind a windshield driving down the road to soccer practice or whatever else we might have normally done before COVID-19, we need to stop and have times that are full of eye contact as well, and then that helps them model that in life. One last point on one-on-one time is the idea of being a good listener. And these are 6 rules of being a good listener. If we're not giving our full attention, keeping away distractions, really being interested in what they're saying. If they're talking about some video game that you could care less about, let's learn about that video game. They care about it. Listening uncritically, they're going to tell us things that we might just start jumping out of our skin to attack and pronounce as wrong. We have to listen uncritically. We're going to get to next week the idea of what to do with missed thoughts, misbehavior, ways of things that we do need to be critical on. But listening means we listen uncritically. Identifying their feelings is very important, and then reflecting your child's words back to them creates truly a sense of being heard. Once they are heard, then you have more power to deal with what's going on. And especially if it's about that child coming in at 2 a.m., way past curfew, all you want to do is scream and yell and then get to bed, taking the time to listen to them and actually having the conversation in that moment might be the most profound thing you can do to understand what really just happened and ensuring that it never happens again, much less of the consequences that would come off of that. The next love language is touch. Most of you know that newborns need this for survival. Literally, they die if they do not get touch. But this need continues throughout their lives. It's not just hugs and kisses. With small children, bath time, helping kids get dressed. I've got teenagers that still want to sit on my lap, snuggling them into bed. And again, that may not just be little kids. And maybe it's that father side of life, but the wrestling, the tickle fights. With little kids, fathers tend to be a little more playful, and it can be carefully throwing a child in the air and catching them. They need that physical touch in all of those ways, and that's profound. The more the research is out there, the more we find creative ways to give them physical affection, the more they develop into the happy, healthy adults we want them to be. Some rules about touch. You got to choose our moments. Now, for a child, any time is going to be a good time. But in the teen years, it probably gets a little more complicated. I have a teenage boy who doesn't really like to be hugged much, especially by his sisters right now. And we need to understand there are times that may change in the process of growing up. But the other area is just because if for you are not a natural touchy kind of person, you don't give hugs, you don't naturally like to be cuddled, you don't like people in your space, we need to overcome our own awkwardness. And this goes back to, this may seem like a foreign language to you, but your kids need you to give them affectionate touch, to really fill up that tank of emotion inside of them. And of course, it needs to come with appropriate boundaries. We need to be teaching them good touch, bad touch. We need to be teaching them that not everybody has a right to touch them, even if that's Aunt Sally who just likes to come and squeeze their cheeks, that there's a way to say no, and we can establish even with Aunt Sally that that's not making my child feel comfortable, and would you not do that? We need to teach them good touch, bad touch, in the sense of affection should be in right ways at right times by right people. The next love language area is the idea of presence, and I want to say what not to do before we talk about what to do. And that is that you can't overdo it. You can't buy off your kids. You cheapen previous gifts when you do that. You definitely can't use it as compensation for one of the other love languages that you didn't spend time with them, so now you're giving them gifts. And we as parents can always give in to emotion of the thought, if I bribe them, then this will happen. And none of us are above bribing our children. You do this, I'll give you this. But if we really depend on bribery as an ongoing resource, we're doing the opposite of what we really want to be as parents. So how do we really use presents? Well, we need to make sure we try to give them at special moments. It's best if they don't expect it. Birthdays ought to be special, and the way we go about birthday gifts, and I'm not talking about a whole lot of money. Nobody's suggesting a whole lot of money. That what makes something special is that it came from you as the parent, really identifying something for them. Again, if giving presents is not your innate love language, this can be a struggle for you, and you may have to work really hard at this, that you have to maybe get some outside help to how do you really start giving good gifts. And it really is powerful when you combine presents with another love language. You give them a toy, and then you go play with them with that toy, if it's a game or a puzzle or whatever. And then as we teach children to give presents. Again, we're teaching this love language for them, even if it's not their love language, as they learn to sow the seeds of generosity. The next love language area is actions, acts of service. And so I know we're going over a little time. We'll be wrapped up in just a few minutes here, but don't underestimate the services you provide your kids. And this was really kind of a hard section of the book for me to read, that sometimes we feel like all we do is cook and clean, and we're the taxi service, and we're the tutoring, and they just seem to just take advantage of us in that way. We are, especially for a kid who needs actions, to know that you love them. When they see that you did their laundry for them, and maybe even you put it away when you didn't have to do that, they feel loved. You just filled their tank. And though they may act like they don't care, or they don't even maybe acknowledge that, you filled their tank up. Again, especially if this is their love language. But you need to find the right approach. It's a balance between doing these things for them and teaching them their own responsibilities. And there are times that even though let me say it this way, there are times that we know their emotional tank is running low, and so we go clean their room for them in an act of showing them love. And that breaks the cycle of an ongoing fight of an unclean room. And then we process through that with them later. That might be just what helps get us past the fight. That probably doesn't make them a perfect cleaner of their room from then on, but it resets the problem we've had going on in our house. We fill up their emotional tank a little bit by showing them that love, and we proceed further with that. And we want to teach them the art of please and thank you. I'm not saying that moms or dads ought to be a slave to their children, and helping them learn the art of thanking you and asking and saying please in that matters. But we need to teach them acts of service. So giving them daily chores, and I would encourage you to start as young as possible. If they can learn to help pick up their toys, even at 18 months, 2 years of age, get them to start being a part of the household, and then increase that as you go on. As you know, little kids can help empty the dryer into the basket. It's pulling out and putting in. That's actually something they might like to do. They probably don't like emptying that laundry basket because that requires folding and putting away, but helping them to grow in that. Gradually increase that as they get older to where they truly enter adulthood with the ability to do their own laundry, clean toilets, make their bed regularly, those kind of things. And in this time, I would tell you this applies to schoolwork as well. But it might be the initial start to school, or it might even be the thought of they're really struggling learning this new concept in school. So I need to really dig in right now and help them get past this moment, and then they'll get back to being able to do their schoolwork more independently after that. But active service, really digging in and helping them win that, because being overwhelmed by schoolwork will empty an emotional tank quickly. And I want to just encourage you to have the right attitude. Your attitude in service is probably the most important thing above the service itself. If you're doing it with anger and hostility, begrudgingly doing things, they're going to know that, and that is not filling their love tank. That might be meeting your need on some level, but that's not meeting their need. I really encourage you that, especially when you feel like your child's emotional tank is empty and they need acts of service, to move forward and go ahead and do what they need you to do for them as you love them in that way. So, the 5 love languages are words, time, touch, presence, and actions. And again, I want to ask you, or I offer to you for your homework this week, is to discover your child's love language, their primary love language. There is a thought of a secondary love language that speaks to them. And so I encourage you on that. To do that, to sit down with your spouse, the important people in your life, and really learn. Make sure you know what is your child's love language. truly the most important thing that we can do when we talk about raising our kids in a behavioral context that leads them to self-regulation, them feeling loved is the most important category in that. And we need to be skilled at loving our children. I've gone a few minutes over here, maybe 5 minutes over. Thank you for hanging in with me this morning. We're about to conclude this time in this class. In about 10 minutes, worship will begin. You know by now that you have to go to a different link for worship. Thank you for being in this class for this last 50 minutes. I pray that your family is growing and being blessed, especially during this time of shelter and care, and that God will continue to give us wisdom as we look towards lifting that and resuming life as normal, that we keep some of the positive things we've done in our families, even when we aren't sheltering in place anymore. Again, thank you for tuning in this morning. Look forward to worshiping with you soon.